They had believed Earth was a world too young to matter. To the Council of Ancient Empires, humanity was a curiosity, noisy and ambitious, but ultimately insignificant. A blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star, filled with a species that had only just reached beyond its cradle. In their eyes, Earth was a place to watch, not to respect. Yet arrogance has a way of blinding judgment, and arrogance ruled the halls of the council. The decision was not made out of necessity but out of pride. Humans had spoken too loudly in the galactic forums, questioned too many decrees, resisted too many subtle attempts at control. Where others bowed, Earth debated. Where others submitted, Earth pushed back. To those who sat in their thrones of centuries, this was insolence. A lesson was needed, they told themselves, and so the order was passed. The strike would be swift, overwhelming, unforgettable. A message to silence the voices of Earth forever. From orbit, the attack fell with precision and cruelty. Cities erupted in fire as kinetic bombardments rained down. Oceans boiled where strikes pierced deep, and continents shook with the force of orbital detonations. It was not war but execution, carefully calculated to break spirit rather than erase species. The Council wanted survivors, just enough to carry the memory of humiliation. They wanted humanity to crawl, to kneel, to beg for the mercy of their betters. Across the planet, shock spread faster than flame. Families vanished in seconds, towers crumbled into ash, networks went dark, and nations that once argued endlessly now shared the same horror. Voices filled the airwaves, pleas, warnings, desperate cries, but the attackers listened only to silence, their command ships watching from above like predators satisfied with their kill. To them, Earth's screams were nothing more than the cracking of a shell beneath a boot. In the council chambers, there was laughter. Cold, indulgent, certain of superiority. They congratulated themselves for delivering order, for teaching discipline to an unruly child. They saw the smoke rising from a distant star and called it justice. None of them imagined that what they had done was not the end of a rebellion, but the beginning of a reckoning. On Earth, the silence that followed was heavier than the bombardments themselves. Entire nations lay buried, yet among the ruins, survivors pulled each other free. Soldiers regrouped with weapons that seemed pitiful against fleets in orbit. Scientists hid fragments of data, knowledge, and hope in underground vaults. Parents whispered to children that they would endure. Humanity, battered and bleeding, did not dissolve into surrender. They did what they had always done, endure the unendurable, cling to the spark that refused to die. The attackers mistook this silence for defeat. They saw no fleets rising to challenge them, no immediate retaliation, no voice raised in the council chambers. They believed humanity broken. They departed with satisfaction, carrying their arrogance back into the stars. They could not understand that grief was not surrender, that shock was not submission. Beneath the quiet surface, something deeper than survival was taking shape. In every shattered city, the same truth spread. Every survivor carried the same wound, and with it, the same fury. Words began to take form, whispered in shelters, spoken over dying radios, carved into the walls of ruins. It was not a speech, nor a command, but a cry of the soul. You attacked our home. You attacked us. Those words did not fade, they multiplied. They carried grief, but they also carried resolve. They turned mourning into fire. The council had thought themselves teachers, but they had only created unity where division once reigned. On a planet often fractured by borders, faiths, and rivalries, there was suddenly only one truth left standing. Humanity had been struck not as nations, not as tribes, not as ideologies, but as a people. And in that moment, humanity became one. Those who had unleashed destruction imagined that history would record Earth as an example of defiance punished. Instead, history was already writing another lesson, that there is no greater mistake than underestimating the will of those who call a place home. The fire they had ignited on Earth did not fade with the smoke. It was carried in the hearts of millions who had lost everything except the determination to answer the attack. The council wanted silence. What they had created was a roar waiting to rise. The smoke had barely settled when the first sparks of resolve began to burn. The devastation was undeniable, but the human response was not collapse. Across every continent, leaders who once argued endlessly now spoke with one voice. Governments dissolved barriers, militaries shared intelligence, and scientists no longer guarded discoveries for nations but delivered them to a united cause. Borders mattered less than survival, and survival demanded unity. What centuries of diplomacy had failed to accomplish, a single assault had forced upon the world. Mourning was vast, but mourning hardened into purpose. Streets once filled with grief turned into centers of coordination. Shelters became hubs of planning. The dead were honored, but the living began to prepare. Humanity refused to see itself as broken, it saw itself as chosen by circumstance to rise together. Every shattered building became a reminder not of weakness, but of what demanded vengeance. Resources once spread thin across industries were funneled into research and war. Factories that once produced cars, satellites, and commercial goods converted overnight into facilities producing weapons, ships, armor, and drones. Vast networks of engineers and coders collaborated across the digital web, transforming knowledge into designs at speeds that startled even themselves. Where the Council had centuries of tradition, humanity now had urgency, and urgency turned invention into wildfire. Survivors scoured the wreckage of downed alien craft, collecting fragments of technology, analyzing alloys, deciphering control systems. What could not be understood was taken apart and rebuilt with human improvisation. What could not be replicated was adapted into new methods of warfare. The galaxy had assumed humanity would need decades to grasp advanced systems. Instead, in months, weapons once alien became weapons unmistakably human. Amid this transformation, a phrase emerged. It began as a whisper among survivors, a cry from those who had lost everything: "You attacked our home. You attacked us." It spread through shelters, into speeches, into transmissions broadcast from one continent to another. It became the unifying oath. Every meeting began with it. Every soldier repeated it before battle drills. It was painted across armor, etched into hulls of ships, woven into songs of mourning that became songs of defiance. It was not propaganda. It was truth distilled into words simple enough for a child, powerful enough to bind a species. The effect was electric. Soldiers trained harder because they no longer fought for nations but for Earth itself. Scientists worked sleepless because every breakthrough was not just data but justice. Even the most broken communities rose because the phrase reminded them their suffering had meaning. Humanity was not simply rebuilding, it was transforming into something sharper, faster, and more dangerous than it had ever been. Artificial intelligence, once restricted by endless debate and regulation, was unleashed under careful control, accelerating decision-making, predicting enemy patterns, coordinating global logistics. It did not replace human will but amplified it. Supply chains became seamless, strategies evolved daily, and what once required years of planning now required only weeks. The pace of change was relentless, fueled by a determination that the galaxy had never imagined. The Council expected passivity. What it had created instead was acceleration. Where other civilizations spent generations perfecting technology, humans compressed generations into single seasons. Where others obeyed ancient hierarchies, humans broke old systems and built new ones overnight. The entire species had been forced into a crucible, and from that crucible something entirely new was being forged. Children grew into soldiers before their time, but they carried no fear, only certainty. Veterans who had once expected retirement returned to service, teaching skills to a generation desperate to learn. Farmers, workers, artists, and scholars all became part of the effort. No one was idle, because no one was untouched. Humanity had become a war machine not out of desire but necessity. The galaxy might have considered humanity fragile, but fragility had hardened into resilience. A species that had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and countless disasters now faced a threat beyond its world. And yet the response was the same as it had always been: adapt, endure, and strike back. Whispers turned into chants, chants into declarations. You attacked our home. You attacked us. It was no longer merely grief. It was a promise, a vow to carry the memory of the fallen into every battle to come. Humanity did not seek pity, nor did it seek negotiation. It sought only justice, and it would not stop until justice was written into the stars. The Council's blow had united Earth in a way no one believed possible. Humanity no longer moved as scattered voices but as one voice, sharpened by loss, fueled by resolve, and armed with a phrase that carried the weight of an entire world. The storm was gathering, and it would not rest until every empire that had laughed at Earth learned the cost of underestimation. The galaxy expected silence to linger, but silence was only preparation. When the first counterblow came, it was not grand fleets or massive armies, it was precision. The enemy believed Earth incapable of coordinated strikes beyond its atmosphere. They believed recovery would take generations. They believed humanity had been broken. That illusion shattered in an instant. In the cold reaches of space, alien patrols vanished without warning. Fleets that had once cruised confidently through human territory were erased in minutes. No survivors carried word back. Wreckage drifted in silence, ships split apart with surgical accuracy. The methods were unfamiliar to the galaxy: sabotage hidden in shadows, ambushes launched from impossible trajectories, weapons cobbled together from stolen parts but wielded with frightening precision. Humanity did not fight like its enemies, and that difference became its greatest strength. Human ships were not sleek or elegant. They were hybrids of scrap, innovation, and desperation. Yet behind their crude appearance lay terrifying efficiency. Weapons were overclocked far beyond alien safety limits. Shields were reconfigured for short bursts of extreme resistance, timed to perfection. Engines burned hotter than they were designed to, sacrificing longevity for decisive strikes. Where alien doctrine prized endurance and control, humans embraced risk, turning every battle into a contest of nerve as much as firepower. The first retaliation was a message. Humanity had studied the Council's fleets, analyzed their weaknesses, and struck not at their strongest defenses but at their arrogance. Command ships, unguarded by assumption of superiority, were targeted and destroyed. Supply convoys, believed safe by tradition, were cut apart with ruthless efficiency. Communication relays fell silent as human hackers cracked systems thought unbreakable, turning the enemy's networks into traps. Panic spread quickly. Reports filtered back to the Council of fleets disappearing, of soldiers whispering about ghosts in the dark, of colonies suddenly isolated and unprotected. The enemy did not understand how a species so recently bloodied could respond with such speed. They did not see the endless drills, the sleepless nights of engineers, the tireless decoding of alien signals. They did not see the relentless will that drove humanity to make the impossible inevitable. What others called reckless, humanity called necessary. Where aliens clung to centuries-old doctrines, humans rewrote strategy with every encounter. Failure was not disaster but a lesson, instantly studied and corrected. Victory was not celebrated but dissected for improvement. Every battle, win or lose, fed into a growing reservoir of experience that expanded faster than any galactic power had seen before. In months, humanity adapted to challenges that had taken others centuries. The phrase that had begun as grief now traveled with every strike. "You attacked our home. You attacked us." It accompanied encrypted transmissions, it echoed in broadcasts intercepted by terrified enemies, it appeared painted on the wreckage of enemy ships left adrift. It was both declaration and warning, carried into the stars not as boast but as truth. The galaxy could no longer pretend Earth's response was silence. It was war, and it was personal. The enemy attempted countermeasures. Larger fleets were dispatched, reinforced by dreadnoughts that had dominated countless wars. Yet each time, humanity struck in ways no prediction could anticipate. Mines hidden in asteroid fields, gravity wells exploited to slingshot ambushes, hacked navigation arrays turning fleets against themselves. Battles that should have been overwhelming victories for the Council ended in chaos. For the first time, the Council began to fear. Fear was foreign to them, for they had not faced a true rival in generations. Yet now they whispered among themselves of an enemy that should not exist. They called humanity unpredictable, irrational, dangerous. What they could not admit was that unpredictability was simply adaptability moving too fast for their stagnant minds to follow. The retaliation was not about conquest. Humanity sought no new thrones, no empire carved into the stars. It sought justice, and justice demanded that those who had rained fire upon Earth should know the terror they had sown. Every strike was both military and symbolic, a reminder that the blue planet had not fallen, and its people were not prey. As human fleets grew bolder, the Council realized the attack that was meant to crush Earth had instead awakened something unstoppable. The silence they had mistaken for defeat was in truth the calm before a storm unlike any they had seen. And the storm had only begun to gather strength. Humanity had spoken, not through diplomats or envoys, but through action. The message was clear, undeniable, and inescapable. You attacked our home, and now you will learn what it means when humanity answers. The storm that began with ambushes grew into a tide no empire could contain. What started as scattered strikes evolved into campaigns that reshaped the balance of power. Human fleets no longer hid in shadows. They moved boldly into regions once thought untouchable. Colonies that had never seen war awoke to find Earth's ships descending, dismantling defenses with ruthless precision, then vanishing before counterforces could arrive. What the Council had dismissed as insurgency revealed itself as a systematic offensive powered by intelligence, speed, and unrelenting determination. The heart of humanity's strength lay not in the size of its fleets, but in the refusal to stagnate. Every captured fragment of enemy technology was repurposed, every battle fed into strategies revised within hours, every mistake became fuel for innovation. While the Council debated endlessly in chambers, humanity acted. Where alien fleets required decades to commission new designs, human engineers built, tested, and deployed in months. It was not elegance that defined them but acceleration, and acceleration outpaced tradition. For the first time in generations, the council chambers were filled not with arrogance but fear. Voices once dripping with certainty now shouted in panic, blaming one another for underestimating the species they had struck. Reports of failed campaigns filled their archives, each one worse than the last. Entire squadrons disappeared without explanation. Colonies went dark. Trade routes collapsed as convoys were hunted across the void. The old powers, used to unquestioned dominance, found themselves unraveling in the face of a species that refused to yield or negotiate. Envoys were sent in desperation. Offers of reparations, concessions, and apologies were carried across the stars. They were met with silence or rejection. Humanity had no interest in bargains. Every attempt at diplomacy ended with the same cold declaration: there will be no peace until justice is complete. The phrase that had begun as a cry of pain now echoed as a judgment, repeated by soldiers, leaders, and civilians alike. You attacked our home. You attacked us. Until the weight of that truth was balanced, no words could erase it. The effect spread beyond the council itself. Other species, long subjugated by fear of its power, began to whisper of defection. Some offered intelligence, others offered resources, all driven by terror of what humanity might become if crossed. For the first time in living memory, the balance of power shifted not toward the council but away from it, as the shadow of Earth's wrath spread across systems like a coming storm. Human tactics deepened that fear. They did not waste time with drawn-out sieges or symbolic shows of power. They struck at infrastructure, dismantled fleets, and left nothing that could be rebuilt easily. They turned enemy weapons against their makers, hacked defense systems, redirected automated guardians, and sowed chaos wherever they appeared. The Council watched in disbelief as weapons designed to ensure eternal supremacy now shattered their fleets under human command. Every act of retaliation reminded them that the enemy they had dismissed had become the mirror of their arrogance. The greater horror was not in the destruction itself, but in the relentlessness. Humanity never stopped moving. Every victory was followed by another strike. Every defeat was met with adaptation that turned the next battle into triumph. Rest was unknown, mercy non-existent. To the Council, this persistence felt alien, yet to humanity, it was survival transformed into vengeance. What had been instinct on Earth, endure, adapt, strike, now played out on a galactic scale. The galaxy, once certain of humanity's fragility, now whispered of inevitability. Empires that had mocked Earth in council halls now trembled at the mention of its name. Generals who once laughed at the thought of war with primitives now begged for strategies to survive. No one admitted it openly, but all understood, humanity could not be stopped by power or intimidation. Its resolve was forged from loss too great to forget, and its will was carried by every survivor who still remembered the fire raining down on their world. What the Council had unleashed was not a rebellion but a reckoning. They had believed themselves untouchable, but the tide of human retaliation erased that illusion. A single truth echoed louder with each battle: humanity had not asked for war, but once war was forced upon them, they became something the galaxy could not contain. And the reckoning was only growing stronger. The Council, once cloaked in untouchable authority, now stood exposed. Worlds they had ruled with certainty were in ruins, fleets they had trusted were ash and silence, and their halls of power echoed with desperation. Where they had once mocked, they now pleaded. Envoys crawled to the remnants of humanity's command channels, offering reparations beyond measure, wealth beyond imagination, and concessions once thought impossible. Yet every plea collapsed against the same unmovable wall. Humanity had no use for apologies. Words could not erase the graves carved into Earth's soil. No bargain could restore what had been stolen. When humanity finally answered, it was not with negotiation but with declaration. The voice carried not from a single leader, not from one nation, but from a united people who had endured fire and clawed their way back stronger. It carried the weight of loss and the fury of survival. The words spoken were simple, but they struck deeper than any weapon. You attacked our home, you attacked us. That truth had become unshakable, and from it flowed a resolve that no promise could bend. The declaration was not just to the Council but to the entire galaxy. It was a warning, a judgment, and a vow. Humanity would not stop until justice was absolute. No longer would Earth be dismissed as primitive or weak. No longer would survival mean silence. The galaxy had forced humanity to grow teeth, and now those teeth were bared without hesitation. Every strike, every victory, every act of retaliation became part of that declaration. The universe was being taught that aggression against Earth would never fade into memory. It would echo forever in vengeance. Fear rippled across civilizations that had once aligned themselves with the Council. Species that had never dared to resist began to withdraw support, some in secret, some openly. Others whispered of alliances with humanity, though they knew such offers would not be accepted easily. The balance of power had shattered, and in its place rose a single undeniable truth: the galaxy would never again look at Earth the same way. Humanity had carved its identity into the stars with fire and blood, and that identity could not be erased. The final blows were not delivered with triumph but with cold certainty. Human fleets struck at the last strongholds, dismantling what remained of the Council's authority. Worlds once centers of power became symbols of collapse. The great armadas that had once ruled unchallenged were scattered, their wreckage floating as monuments to hubris. Humanity did not conquer those worlds, nor did they seek to rule. They left them broken, reminders of what happens when arrogance drives destruction. The declaration that rang across the void was not the cry of conquerors but of survivors turned executioners. Humanity did not want their throne, their wealth, or their territory. It wanted the galaxy to understand that an attack on Earth would always carry a price higher than any empire could pay. That truth burned into the memory of every world that had once laughed at the thought of human defiance. For the survivors on Earth, the war was never about expansion. It was about dignity. It was about refusing to bow, refusing to let the fire that had consumed their cities end their story. By the time the last Council fleets fell, humanity had already reshaped itself into something permanent, a species that would never again allow its home to be threatened without consequence. The words remained, repeated endlessly, etched into monuments, carried by soldiers, whispered by children who had been born under the shadow of war. You attacked our home. You attacked us. Those words were not just history but the foundation of everything to come. The galaxy now lived with a new reality. No envoy would ever again dare suggest Earth was fragile. No empire would forget the sight of their fleets turned to ruin by a people who had once been dismissed as insignificant. No historian could deny that the day humanity was struck was the day the galaxy changed forever. The declaration was finished, but its echo endured. Humanity did not claim victory with celebration, it claimed survival with warning. The universe had been taught that Earth would not kneel, would not forgive, and would not forget. In every council hall, in every distant colony, in every whispered fear, the same words carried their weight. Humanity had spoken, and the message would last longer than empires. You attacked our home, you attacked us. And the galaxy would never make that mistake again.